In this video, I will show you how to install, set up and use the software that I use as well to get started with DeepSkyAstrophotography. First of all, it is important to know that every link and website that I am using in this video is in the description of this video. My service to you. First, we start by installing the Ascom-Standards. And the Ascom-Standards are the programs that, along with the EQMOD, make sure that your computer can talk with your Skywatcher mount. In my case, the HEQ5. The first thing to do is to press platform 6.6 SP1, or should you watch this video in the future, the most recent version of the Ascom, and then you simply press download. You press save and we wait for a moment and then you can open it. Always accept everything because we trust everything and everyone, and then it's going to install the package. You don't have to touch this, you just press install and then you have installed Ascom. You press finish here and that's really all you have to do for now. The next thing we're going to install is the EQMOD. And as I said before, those two software packages work together to control your mount. Since we have a Skywatcher HEQ5 mount, I am using the EQ Ascom. And by the way, you also need a special cable for this, a so-called EQ DARE cable that can go from your mount port via USB to your computer. And it's quite a pricey little cable, but that's the only way you can use it. To download the EQMOD, press download and then you think, oh, that's all. No. Then you press source forge here and you press here again. The second, the EQ Ascom, and then the top one to download the latest version. You just have to wait 5 seconds here to start the download and then you press save again. And you can also open the EQ Ascom again. We press yes. We say install the source files, and I do want the sample scripts. And the middle ones we don't need. So I press next and install. I don't need to read all the release notes. Finished. Done. Next package is the PhD2, and that's for auto guiding. So that's a program that you end up pairing with your guide camera. Keep in mind that there are two versions for Mac and one version for Windows, which is the most recent version, and we will download it. We open that one and we will install again. We press next, next, install, we just wait. I don't need all this and we're finished. And the next program to install is the camera driver for the ASI cameras. I myself use two ZWO ASI cameras, so my guide camera and also my main camera are both ZWO ASI cameras. And that means we need the software to control the cameras via the computer. And you have to look carefully which package you download here. I use the camera driver and this is the most recent version. There I press the Windows sign and then press save. We open it and again we press yes, we press next, and I don't need to visit the website and I press finish. And that's also done. Then we go to Nina, and that is the nighttime imaging and astronomy software, and that is your automation software. And there are some different options that we can choose here. The releases are the most stable released versions that you can download, but you can also download the beta versions from Nina. And these are the newest packages with the newest features, but it is important to know that those beta packages can still be a little bit, well, less stable. So occasionally they can even crash. Since I don't have many clear nights here, and I know that when there is a clear night, I just want everything to work. So for me, I always use the most recent but stable version of Nina. In this case, version 2.1. I hit the download and save. That's a slightly larger package than the previous software we downloaded, which we can also open again. And we are going to accept and install. I have, of course, installed Nina before, so of course I've read everything and all the license terms and conditions really carefully. So we press yes, and from then on it's just a bit of a patience until it's installed. And that gives me some great time to make coffee. Alright, we don't press launch because I don't want to open Nina yet, so I press close. Right now, these are the packages that we are installing. And for the next step, it's important that you're going to stand up. Yeah, get up and connect everything that you want to your computer. So that's your mount with the EQDR cable, that's your guide camera, that's your main camera. And, don't forget also turn on the equipment itself. It's a hell of a troubleshooting when nothing is working, when it's just not turned on. Trust me. If you've done all that, then it's time to start setting up the Ascom and the EQMOD. And for that, you can go to the program they call the Toolbox. And that is this little program. And we start with the driver setup, and then you get to see this. This driver setup is already set up for me, so it will look a little different to you, but I will walk through it. The timeout, that means after how much time that there is no longer a connection between your mount and your computer, you will get a warning that the connection is broken. I prefer to set it to 2000 because Nina also gives warnings for this. Retry means how often the EQMOD is going to try to reconnect to your mount, and preferably that's as often as possible. So I put it on 2. The bounce, I don't know how else to pronounce it. That is the connection speed via USB from your computer to the mount. And what I've noticed is that the HEQ5 likes a connection speed of 9600, but the EQ6 prefers the 115200. So keep that in mind. I set it up for the HEQ5 right now, so I put it to 9600. If for any reason there should be a problem with your connection, think again and try to adjust this speed. For the port, you can press the binoculars, and we press that and then it says searching found. And in my case, that is COM3. But let me tell you this, the first time you're pressing those binoculars, it's not going to say found. And then you have to manually select which COM port you are using. You find this by going to the device manager on your computer, and then you go to ports, COM and LPT. Which you open and it says something along the lines of USB serial port, and then it says, in my case, COM3. That corresponds in my case, so that's going to be totally fine, but make sure that those COMs are the same. If we go to the site information, and that does not mean any website or whatever, but in this case it means the position where you are going to practice the astrophotography. Here you put in your latitude, longitude and elevation. And this information can also be found through a website, and for that I use gpscoordinates.net, which will ask to use your location, and if you allow it, it will fill in the address it found. This website is also in the description of the video, and if you have any questions about it or if you can't find it, just leave a comment and of course I will try to help you. In the lower box are the general options, and you can choose, for example, the language. I've set it to English because I like to see everything in English, but if you choose local dependent, then the Ascom setup and the EQMOD will switch to the language of your computer. If you have done that, press OK, and it opens the toolbox again, and then press the Ascom Connect button. This is the screen you will see. So to test if everything is connected properly, I press 4 here, because otherwise your mount will move incredibly slow and you won't notice it moving. And before moving your mount, make sure that you can move your mount freely at this time. So make sure that it is not tied against a wall, or that if it flips, your dog will not think it's some sort of toy and grabs all the cables and, bad things will happen. Either to your mount or your dog, I don't know. But make sure it is free. And now press any button, north, east, south or west. And look and listen to your mount and observe if your mount is actually moving. I'm going to do that now. Yes, it's moving. That's it for east. I'm going to move it north as well. And that's working also. So it's going to be all right. When you're done testing, you can go to the home position and it will put it back exactly how the EQMOD found your mount before you started playing with it. When it reaches that position, it also says nicely the mount is parked. Something very useful to do is if we expand this, and then here's all kind of stuff. But what is handy to do is to set your mount limits. That means that if for whatever reason Nina says you have to turn the mount in a certain way, but your telescope is so big that it will crash into your mount, the mount limits say to Nina that the telescope cannot move that way, or at least not that much. Whenever the object you are tracking is at a position that your mount won't cross the mount limits anymore, it will just start tracking the object as normal. To set those mount limits, it will ensure that the telescope will never crash into your mount for whatever reason. So to enable it, press the configure button here and you get this beautiful thing. The first thing you have to do here is to unpark your mount and then you choose a position. So let's say I want to set my western limit first. To do so, I simply press west and then I look at the mount to see what the mount is doing. And what you are aiming for is that the mount comes close to its limit, but still a little bit off it. And then we stop moving the mount. So we just let go of the button. Okay, let's do it. We press the western button. And this is almost the limit. And as you can see here, this green piece is the amount it moved. You press the plus here, and that means you've now adjusted the western limit. The easiest thing to do now is to just park it on the home position again. Unpark again and do the exact same thing for the eastern limit. Alright, we press the plus here and then press the plus here. And then press save. And you can call it whatever you want. You press OK and from now on your mount limits are set. So again, this ensures that you never accidentally hit your mount with your telescope and it's going to prevent a lot of problems in the future. Okay, after you've parked your mount again, the Ascom and EQMOD are finished and you can close the program. Next, we are going to open PhD2 Guiding, which welcomes me with a first light wizard. And we're going to just go through it. You press next and you can indicate here which camera is your guide camera. And as I've said before, I use the ZWO ASI camera, which is already connected to the PC. So I say yes, and it enters automatically the pixel size for us. It's important to look up the guide scope focal length. In my case, it's a 50mm and you press next. The next thing it asks is what mount you are using. And in my case, that is the Ascom HEQ5 or 6. It's already connected and set up to communicate with the mount. And PhD2 will now start EQMOD in the background to see if everything is indeed working. And then you press next. And it gives me a warning that says that if you want to check certain settings, you can go through this whole document there's online and you can see if all the settings are correct. But I know we have done everything correctly, so I press process. Here it asks if I have an adaptive optics device, which I do not. So I press next and then it says your profile is completed and ready to save. Well, I just give it a name, HEQ5 with the 150p telescope. I press finish. And then it gives us the option to build a darks library. You can do this all by yourself and you can press start here and then the guide camera goes to take some pictures to make a dark library. But right now here in the house, you see it's 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the sun is shining, it's very bright here, so I can't take dark enough pictures right now to shoot my dark frames. So I will do that at a later time. To build the library, you press start and you cover your guide scope. And from then on, PhD2 will do everything automatically. For now, I just press stop here because otherwise it will do all kinds of things, and I press cancel. And this is all you need to do in PhD2. Right now, you can close it, and the next thing you need is Nina. We're going to open Nina, and there are some settings that we have to go through. First of all, you start here in a fresh Nina, and it asks you for your main camera. In my case, it is the ZWO ASI 533 MC Pro. And the 290mm Mini, that is my guide camera. You select your main camera and then you say connect. And then there are some options you can go through. First of all, you can set the cooling of your sensor. So that is the temperature your sensor should be before taking pictures. My default is -10 degrees. Although in this winter I've had a few times that I had to set it even lower because it was already -11 outside. And then the sensor temperature just keeps dropping throughout the night. The minimum duration is how long it will take before your camera is cooled down to that number. So if you don't want your cooler power to go full power right away with so much noise that your neighbors might knock on your door and say, "Gee, what kind of devices do you have in your garden?" then I would suggest to give it a few minutes or so, so it goes all a bit more gradual. And it also might be better for the fan on your camera. The same settings can be applied for warming the camera, but for that I just leave it at 0 minutes. So the fan will just turn off and the chip starts to warm by itself. The gain I have defaulted to 101, and for those who know why. And the offset I leave on my default settings. My USB limit, which is defaulted at 40, but I set it higher because I noticed that if I set my USB limit to 40, somehow my computer cannot download the pictures from my camera. When setting it at 90, it works somewhat okay, but just to be safe, I set it here at a maximum at 100, and it works perfectly for me. Okay, so that's all we're going to do here. If you have a filter wheel, you can select it here and connect it, but I don't have it, so I cannot show you. The same goes for the focuser and the same for the rotator. Now we're going to telescope, and there it already says EQMOD / Ascom HEQ5 or 6, and we press connect. In the background, you can see that the EQMOD automatically starts, and I get a warning here. I'm going to tell you very honestly that I do not know what this warning means, but I know it works, and my rule in astrophotography is if something works, stay away from it. Do not update it, don't touch it, don't try to fix it. If it works, and you stay away from it. Because if you want to make changes, everything will get worse. And your computer will try to do all kinds of things again, and just stay away from it. It works. Anyway, here you can also park your mount and unpark your mount, as you can still do in the EQMOD itself. So fortunately, it all works together very neatly. That's everything you need here for the mount. Next up, the guider, and we press on PhD2 and connect. And you see that it automatically connects and it says guider connected, success. You will also see that PhD2 immediately starts looping exposures, but right now my dust cap is on the guider, so you don't see that much. An important note is that you get to see your PhD2 profile, so make sure that if you have multiple profiles, you select the correct one. You also see the options for dithering, but just like the other settings, I will just leave them at default for the moment. If you have any questions about the settings or setting this up, just let me know in the comment sections below and I could go into some more detail. For the rest, the switch or the flat panels or the weather or the dome or the safety monitor, it's all irrelevant at this moment, so we will leave it for what it is. The next thing we're going to do is that we take a look at the plugins. And if we look at available, we see that there are many plugins available to install. Well, how do you install them? Very simply, you just click on the plugin that you want and you press install right here in the top right. And as you can see, I already have the 3-point spoiler alignment installed. And if you have seen the live streams where we do live astrophotography, then you know that it works very, very well for me, as you don't need to align with Polaris. You can really point your telescope anywhere in the sky, and with plate solving, the 3-point polar alignment knows where you are and what your deviation is, so that you can correct it and polar align really, really well. So you can install all the plugins you want. And then it is important to go to the options, because in the options, there are also some things we have to adjust. If we go to equipment, then it is important that you check the pixel size of your main camera and also check the bit depth of the main camera you are using. The same goes for the focal ratio, and the settle time after slew is also important to fill. I've set it to 15 seconds here, and that means that if your telescope or mount moved around, it will take around 15 seconds to rest. So it really makes sure that it is completely stable again and doesn't move anymore before it continues with doing anything else. The next thing is imaging, and then I mean under options, the imaging tab and not the other imaging tab, to make things confusing. It's important to decide in what format Nina saves the images. I save all my pictures in FITS files, but would you rather save them in TIFF files or XESF files, you can select it here. What is also useful is to select where to save the images. I think the standard is on C and then images in the Nina folder or something, but I want it on my D drive under Astro. You can change the location by clicking on the 3 dots and then just select in which folder Nina may save the images. What is also important are the meridian flip settings, and it's very useful that Nina can actually automatically flip the telescope, but we need to set it up correctly. We start at the top, minutes after meridian, which is set at 5 minutes, and that has to do again with the limits of your telescope that we have indicated earlier in the EQMOD. If you do have a limit which needs you to flip immediately at the meridian flip, then you can fill in 0 minutes. And exactly on the time of the meridian, it will do the flip. The disadvantage of this is that there can be a small discrepancy between the time of your computer, Nina, and the telescope. So in some cases, it can happen that the telescope will perform 2 meridian flips. So my advice is that if you are not hitting your telescope and the mount limits, use those 5 minutes. I've set the maximum minutes after meridian to 10 minutes. The rest of the settings I've left as they are. Of course, I recenter my telescope after the flip. And that means that if you have a certain frame in mind and you have made a certain frame in the framing assistant in Nina, which I will show you later, then after the flip, Nina makes sure to go back to that exact same framing position. For the telescope settle time after the flip, I'm not sure if this is a standard or that I've adjusted it, but what I've noticed is that because both the RA and the declination move, that sometimes it had a small aftershock, even after 15 seconds of rest. Therefore, I've set it to 30 seconds before it starts again with auto-guiding and before it continues imaging. If you own an autofocuser, I would definitely recommend to autofocus after a meridian flip, because you never know what happened during the flip. You can also make sure that after the meridian flip, the images are automatically rotated, so that you can see it how you saw it before the flip. This means, and they say that here, that this is for viewing purposes only, or for displaying purposes only. So the final image is not rotated 180 degrees, but it's only the preview that you see in Nina, which is rotated. For me, it's not necessarily, so I leave it off. The next topic, that is the plate solver. And the plate solver is really an important part of both the 3-point polar alignment and for the automatic framing of Nina. By default, both solvers would say ASTAP, but for my blind solver, I do not use ASTAP, I use astrometry.net. So let's start setting this up. First of all, we will configure ASTAP, and to do that, we have to download it here. This link is of course in the description of the video, and again, there are several different versions available. In my case, Windows 64-bit, and we press Program. This takes us to the source workspace, and we wait again for 5 seconds, and then we can download it. I'm 1000% sure that ASTAP is a trustworthy program, so I press Execute anyway. And I want to install it on my C drive. I press Next, Next. I don't need a desktop icon. Next. And install. Next. And I don't need to launch it now, so I press finish. And of course, then you think we are finished, but no, you have to download something else. And that is something very important because that is the star database. And the star database is telling the ASTAP software where all the stars are located in the sky at which time. So it makes it really important to install this properly. The star database is about a gigabyte in size, so it can take a little longer to download. Once it's downloaded, you open it and make sure that it is installed in the same location as where you installed the ASTAP software. We press next, install, and this may take a while. Once it's done, press finish and you can go back to Nina. And in Nina, it is important that if you click within the placeholder settings on the ASTAP settings to enter the correct path of your ASTAP installation. And you can do that by clicking the 3 dots and go to the astap.exe. So it's important to know where you have installed it. The search radius, the downsample factor and the maximum objects I leave at default. And it has so far always worked well for me. So then I hear you asking, why then still go for the placeholder ASTAP and for the blind solver astrometry.net? Well, that's because the ASTAP is very, very fast software. And I mean, really fast. You take a picture and within a second often, it already knows what you are looking at and what it sees. But if there is even a small movement in the image, and if it's even a tiny little bit out of focus, the ASTAP software really has no idea what it's looking at. And then it can kind of making a loop with error messages all the time. And in that case, you just cannot proceed with imaging. Astrometry.net is slower, but it's a very nice online tool that is less susceptible to focus and to certain star trailing. So it's a bit more forgiving in that respect. What you have to do to set up astrometry.net for Nina is to get the API key. And you can get the API key by pressing astrometry.net, which takes you to the website. And then you have to log in. Well, I use my Google account. And once you are logged in, it's also nice that you can go to My Images. And you can see exactly which images are sent to astrometry.net. So which ASTAP couldn't solve. For example, this is my most recent one, and you can see this is the Wizard Nebula. I don't see it, but astrometry.net just knows this is the Wizard Nebula. Well, if you've seen this on the live stream, then you know how this eventually went. But anyway, we're not talking about that. We want to have the API key. And you can find the API key within the API tab. You copy that and you paste it here behind API key in Nina. And this finishes setting up Nina. And I suppose it's good to show you briefly how Nina works. And that is the last thing I'm going to tell you in this video. And first of all, it's important to connect everything. And then you can go to the Sky Atlas. And in here, you can put the object name. So, for example, the Andromeda Galaxy or M31. You fill it in and you press search. And as you can see here, Nina recognizes M31 as, well, the Andromeda Galaxy. You see where it currently is in the sky, and you also see here, this is the twilight time, the real astronomical night, twilight time again, and from there on, the new day begins. So you can see exactly where Andromeda is and how that object moves in the sky from your perspective. From here on, you can immediately add this object to a sequence, but I always find it very useful to use the framing assistant. And there it shows the Andromeda Galaxy in our case. And this square that you see, that is the frame that your camera is going to see. And if you think, well, yeah, I do like the core of the Andromeda Galaxy, but I would rather photograph the outside rings of the Andromeda Galaxy, then you simply drag that frame to where you want to see, what you want to photograph. And from then on, you can add the target to the sequence. And that means that Nina is going to photograph this exact frame for you. So we press add to sequence and then I say simple sequencer. And this is a simple sequencer, and there are a number of options in here, like automatically cooling the camera when you start with the sequence, unparking the mount, and automatically performing the meridian flip, and so on. But if we press here, and that's always a good thing to do, then you can turn on these 3. And what it does is when you start the sequence in Nina, Nina makes sure the telescope moves, well, roughly to the target. Next, it will start plate solving, and it will center the target, and it makes sure to do that exactly within the frame that we just set up. Obviously, after that, you want to make sure that, well, if you have the ability to do so, to start guiding, so you can take longer exposures and the pictures do not contain star trailing. Then below here, you can say the total number of pictures you want to take. The time per picture, so this is now 1 second a picture, or you can say, let's say, 300 seconds a picture, and you can tell the type of picture. So we can now shoot lights, or flats, or darks, or bias, and, well, the difference between those are, well, that's for another video, but you can choose them. And if you have different filters, you can also say which filter for how many seconds, for how many images you want to use. And you can also turn on dithering here and indicate after how many images it should dither again. And if you now press start sequence, then everything you have entered here will start, and it will actually take those exposures you want to get. For now, we won't do that, and we will just go to the imaging tab below, and I press image here. And I just want to make a 10-second exposure and see if indeed a picture is taken. At the moment, it is not. And this error is something I get always when I first start Nina. And the solution is to simply restart Nina, which I did. And then I connect the 533 MC Pro again, I connect the HEQ5 again, and I connect the guider again. It's not necessary at this time, but it's nice to know that everything just works. Then I go to imaging and I select image, and then I try again. We see below here that it is actually photographing, and then we see here shortly what my camera sees. And I wonder very much what it sees, but this is what my camera sees right now with a 10-second exposure. Alright, so this is all I want to tell you about the software for now. If you have any questions about anything in this video or anything about astrophotography, let me know in the comment section below, or join the Discord where we have regular conversations about everything astro related. Thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope you got something out of it. If so, please leave a like, and if you are interested in astrophotography, subscribe to the channel. Now, it's time to make another cup of coffee, go outside and look at the stars.